Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to grecochess, the YouTube channel of chess. I'm your host. My name is Karilos Eniziris, and in this video, we're going to show to you what happened at round number 5 of the Ed Kopiecki Memorial Tournament that was hosted by the Queen's Chess Club. If you've seen the previous videos, in round number 1, I got a draw, in fact, with a player much stronger than me. Round number 2, bye, because I was in Atlantic City for the Atlantic City Open. Run number 3, disaster, lost to a lower rated player. And run number 4, I got a draw with a player rated lower than me. And now it was time for number 5. Until now I have 1.5 out of 4 points. How will I be able to do? The best I could hope is a win and end up with 2.5 out of 5. But let's first give a look at the announcement of the tournament. Once again, share the screen. And here we are. It takes place, it is a QCC Queen's Club Ed Kopiecki Memorial Swiss, a former member of the club named Ed Kopiecki, they honor his memory. Takes place in 5 consecutive Fridays, starting from the 27th of March, and then April 3rd, 10th, 17th, and 24th. One game every time. What are the time controls? G90, D5, meaning that when the game starts, players in the tournaments, they have their chess clocks. Each player has their own clock. There's one instrument, but there are two, divided in two pieces, each of them the clock of each player. So when the game starts, every player has 90 minutes on their clocks. When your opponent's thinking, the clock does not move. When it's your time to think, meaning after the opponent has completed their move and before you complete your move, for the first 5 seconds, this is the delay. The clock does not move and then it continues going downwards, and you must complete all of your moves before the clock goes down to 0. Otherwise, you're out of time, and in most cases, you have lost a game no matter how great your position. The only exception is if there is insufficient material, you might get away with a draw. Very rare. But let's see who's my opponent. The next question. His name is Hantian Ying. I had faced him in the past, I had lost from him in the past, quite easily, I would say. His rating is 1764, compared this with mine, 1656, so Hantian is 108 points ahead of me. He was the favorite. But this doesn't mean too much. I have lost with players with lower rates and have defeated players with rates higher than mine. But let's see what will happen this time. Hantian has white pieces, I have the black. And I'm going now to the analysis board of chess.com to see what exactly happened. What was the case? Hantier has the white pieces. I have the black, as I mentioned. And I'm going to copy the moves from the score sheet one by one on the chessboard. And the computer is going to give a number showing what does it think. Positive number means white is doing better, negative black is doing better. We'll make a comment on the move with a symbol, anything from 2 exclamation points, it's a brilliant, to 2 question marks, that is a blunder. What was the best move for the player that has just played, and what are the top 5 moves for the player whose turn to come? And we start with Hantian with the white pieces, starting with the most popular first move for white, pawn to e4. Almost as popular is pawn goes to d4. These two have a different quote-unquote philosophy. Pawn to e4 is usually more tactical. Pawn to d4 is mostly strategical, but some players can bypass them with the English opening. Pawn to d4, pawn to c4, or the Reti, knight to f3, or the hyper-modern pawn to g3. Or may want to surprise more with a pawn to b3 or pawn to b4. These have a lot of surprise value. How to reply? The most popular answer is the French. Sometimes players play symmetrically pawn to e5. You may want to play the Pyrrhic to d6, or the Scandinavian to d5, or the Alekhine knight to f6, or even the Owen pawn to b6. But I play the one I know the best. Pawn to e6. Pawn to d4 for Hantian wants to occupy the center with 2 pawns. Almost as popular is knight goes to f3. If you want to surprise, you may want to push your pawn to c3 or even unite to c3. And how to reply? Let me also place a pawn in the center, pawn to d5. And now what can we do? There are many responses for white for the third move of the French. One of them is the advance. Pawn to e5, you get more center, but you lose control of the d5 square, and usually your opponent replies the pawn to c5. Other than that, you may place your knight from b1 either to c3 or to d2. Your bishop to d3. You may try to do something tricky like pawn to c4. But Hantian went for the exchange variation. Still in the book, you see these little booklets, they imply that we are following chess opening theory, and this move should be no surprise to anyone. You may not be able to defend well if you don't know how, but at least you should not be surprised. Pawn to d5, and I take back pawn to d5. The problem for white, if they play the exchange, is that the French bishop, the bishop on c8, that before was blocked by the e6 pawn, now is much more free. Pawn to c4 for Hantian, that until now we've been following the French defense exchange variation. See here it's called the name it's called. And now the move number 4 is for Hantian to place his pawn to c4, attack the d5 pawn, and now the opening slightly changes the name. It is the French defense exchange Monte Carlo variation. I never knew that name, maybe because it was first played in Monte Carlo. How to reply? Fight for the d5 pawn, pawn to c6. But until now it was book move, and my pawn to c6 is not a book move any longer. It is just good, that gives a small advantage, 0.28 to Hantian. Next move, Hantian develops his knight from b1 to c3, move 5 for the d5 square, and I place my knight f6, develop my knight, and also fight for d5. But here there is a little problem for chess.com. I have played this a series of moves in games that the daily games, and chess.com is suspicious. Do I do this analysis to create my new YouTube video, or because I need to get illegal help in my games? That's why it refuses to show the analysis. But fortunately for the analysis, fortunately for this video, the next move of Hantian does not coincide with what my opponents may have played. Knight goes to f3. And that I can uncheck this button. I check analysis, and we see that after 6 moves, this is the book move, and I don't know how. The only explanation is that I played the pawns to c6 and knight to f6 book moves, but the other way around. In any case, it's still a book move for Hantian, and the score is 0.00 after the 6th move of white. Opening, we're developing pieces. I developed my bishop to e7, ready to castle, short castle. Bishop to e2 for Hantian. We are out of book any longer. It was book move this to e7, but this is not book move. And now for me, I can take the pawn on c4. I could take it before, but I prefer to take it now, because now Hantian will need 2 moves to take the pawn. First move bishop to e2, and second to c4. Had I taken earlier, he would have taken the pawn in 1 move to f1 to c4. And in the development, speed is very important. So I take the pawn now. This is a so-called, it's not even a gambit pawn. Hantian will take it back immediately. No surprise here. Short castling for me, short castling for Hantian. Bishop to g4, and I'm pinning the knight on f3. Meaning if the knight moves by any chance, if Hantian accidentally touches this knight, I win the queen, and basically I win the game. No such luck, of course, I wasn't counting on that. Bishop goes back to e2, but this bishop has moved already 3 times the opening. e2, to c4 to win the pawn, and to e2 back. This gives me a very small advantage, of course, much, much less than had I won the queen. And I continue developing my knight to d7. We finished 10 moves, and let's see the score. Hantian is leading by 0.02, almost nothing. Let's continue. Pawn to h3, asking my bishop to go somewhere else. And I go to h5 to continue this being on this diagonal. Computer would rather have it go to e6 because on e6 here, bishop has much more freedom than h5. It's not exactly a pin, but if both knight and bishop would somehow be forced to move, I win the queen. Not very likely, but at least it exerts some pressure. Next move. Hantian develops his dark bishop to f4 and controls a wonderful diagonal. It looks like a London bishop from h2 to b8. It's not protected now, but it can easily be protected later. My knight goes to b6 to give more space to my queen and more control of the d5 square. Hantian sends his queen to d2, now defends the bishop on f4. And my bishop goes to b4, and I am pinning the other knight on c3. Same story, if Hantian accidentally touches the knight, I win the queen and win the game. Hantian decides now to pin my knight, because if he doesn't pin my knight will go to e4. I'm attacking the queen, and the knight cannot take the queen. The knight cannot take the knight because I win the queen. The pressure is enormous. So Hantian decides to pay me with the same coin, as I say. Bishop goes to g5, and also my knight on f6 is pinned. If I decide to place my knight on e4, I lose my queen automatically. And yes, I win the queen, but I would have to calculate a lot to see who is doing better. Or Hantian may decide to take my knight with his knight. I win the, and this goes with, doesn't come with a check. Let's see again. Let's do again the arrows. If I put here, take here, I can win the queen. I can win the queen, he can win my queen. Then it's a very complicated case. I couldn't see a way I could get an advantage. And since there are so many combinations, I might even be behind. What I decided to do, keep my queen safe and send my knight to d5, exerting more pressure on the c3 knight. The c3 knight is pinned, cannot move. It's attacked twice by my bishop. By my bishop and by my knight. The arrows, when will I learn them? Defended twice by the pawn and with the queen. If you exchange everything, the pawn on c3 is backward, but I want more than that. I want to get advantage of the pin. Advantage means I want materially to win at least a pawn. Hantian places his pawn on a3, challenging my bishop. Computer thinks it is a blunder and wants me to start the following series of moves. You're going to see it here. Bishop takes on a c3. I don't like it because I lose the power of the pin. Pawn takes back. My knight goes to e4. Attacks the pawn of the queen. I lose my queen. I take the queen. I lose my knight. Take the bishop. And after I do everything and I reach an ideal game, move number 25 should look like that if both of us play more than 10 moves perfectly. Both sides have two rooks and a knight. I have 6 versus 5 pawns, and my pawns are in 2 islands versus 3. So I have a better pawn structure and an extra pawn. So if I take this on c3, my bishop takes a knight, and I play perfectly the next 10 moves, I should be having a wonderful position of 2.09. But I could not calculate on that. And I didn't want to take chances, and especially didn't want to lose the advantage that the pin is giving me. That's why I moved my bishop to a5. This is a computer 15 moves. Instead of having an advantage of almost 2, or 192, I'm ahead by only 0.21. Hantian sends his pawn to b4. Now I completely lose a pin. So if I move the bishop, the knight on c3 can take on d5, and I have a very weak d5 pawn. What I decide to do is take the knight on c3, which the computer thinks it is the best move. And Hantian takes back the only way he can with the queen. And now the pawn on b4 is pinned, meaning if Hantian would push to b5, I win the queen, but of course he's not going to do it. If anything, he's attacking my bishop on a5. That's why I sent my bishop to b6. Hantian saw that he pushed one of my bishops back. He wants to push the other one back with pawn to g4. What is happening with this move? Why it is an inaccuracy? On the short term, I must save the bishop, and the only square to place it is on g6. Otherwise, I lose a bishop. On the other side, his king is weakened. But I had many games where my opponents have weakened their kings like that, and although I saw it as an advantage, I was not able to exploit it. I ended up either losing, or if I won, it was for a completely different reason, or perhaps even drawing. But first of all, let's save the bishop. Bishop goes to g6, but the computer thinks it's better if I first attack the queen. I didn't do it because I was afraid that if Hantian played a move like queen goes to e3, for example, then both my knight and my bishop are under attack. Of course, my knight can take the bishop. Queen can take it back, and who knows what will happen. Computer won. Yes, and I take it here. He takes it. We'll change queens. Bishop goes to g6 and so on. But the difference is not that great. It's about 0.4. First of all, I'm saving my bishop because that's what I saw at that moment. I don't want to take chances with all these queen exchanges. Rook goes to d1 for Hantian. That gives more protection to his d4 pawn. This takes the computer. Now the d4 pawn, what happens is after all these exchanges, it is isolated. Meaning there are no pawns on the c and e file to protect it. Which means that if I attack it enough times with my pieces, I might be able to win it. And winning a central pawn is very important. That's why currently it is attacked twice by the bishop and the queen. It's defended twice, but it was defended twice by the queen and the knight. Now it's defended 3 times. Extra safe for Hantian. My queen goes to d6. Why? No pin any longer. Until now, my knight on f6 was pinned. And where can my queen go? I don't want to take back with the g7 pawn because then I have weak pawn structure. I mean, my queen could go, for example, to d5, to d7, or to c7, c8, doesn't matter where. But then Hantian would take my knight with the bishop. Let's assume it goes to d5. Hantian takes the bishop on f6, and I have to take back with the pawn, which weakens my pawn structure. Double pawns, one extra pawn island, and weakens my king. That is why the only square where the queen could safeguard the knight and not be pinned, on e7, of course, it's still pinned, would be d6. And that's what I do then. Computer thinks it's inaccuracy. Would rather have me attack the queen. Okay. And now that there's no pin any longer, and Hantian doesn't have any advantage with his bishop on g5, and my knight on f6 can attack the queen, he decides to take my bishop. To use the bishop to take my knight. How can I take it back? 2 ways, as I mentioned before. I don't like to weaken my pawn structure. I decide to take it with my queen, although computer would rather have it with my pawn. I take it with my queen because the queen here still attacks the d4 pawn. It's not facing the d1 rook. And I couldn't see the problem why. Well, on the short term, Hantian could push his pawn to g5, attack the queen, but my queen could easily escape, even go back to d6. We finished 20 moves. What is the score? I'm ahead by 0.25. Hantian decides to defend his pawn on d4 even stronger with the knight to e5. Blocks the queen from going to the pawn. Maru goes to d8, fighting for the d file, fighting to win the d4 pawn. The pawns attacked twice by bishop and rook, defended twice by queen and rook. And now there is no pin. If queen takes the knight, uh, pawn takes back. I win the queen, but I lose it immediately. No, that's not good for me. And Han Tian wants to protect his knight even more and send his pawn to f4, which is inaccuracy. When he played it, I saw it. Yes, the pawn protects the knight, but the pawn on d4 does not protect the knight because of the pin. We have the pawn on d4. It's not only isolated, it's pinned. Bishop from b6 goes to g1. So the pawn cannot move if it had to. But can I win it? Once again, attacking twice. Defended twice. Not yet. I move my queen to d6 to defend it a third time. Let's attack 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Defend it twice. Can I win it? Because I have a queen nearby. I have to be very careful. Not just 3 versus 2. If I take the bishop, he take it with the rook. I win the rook. Fortunately, I could take because I cannot take it first the queen. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the queen for a rook. And queen takes, rook takes, and I'm quite ahead if we start this exchange. But Hantian had an idea. Counterattack. He attacks my bishop, and which computer says it's a blunder. And we're going to explain what's happening. He attacks my bishop by pushing the pawn to f5. You see that my bishop is lost on g6. It's completely hopeless. If it takes the pawn, it's going to be lost for a pawn. If it goes to h5, again, it's going to be lost. Yes, Hantian will double his pawn, but he's winning an entire bishop. But then I saw something else. Goodbye, bishop. I don't care too much about you because I have another juicier piece to get. The knight on e5. Because of the pawn, because of the pin, the pawn on d4 cannot take my queen. Here is the pin. Because if pawn takes, bishop goes sees the king. That's why it's an illegal move. Yes, I will lose the bishop, but I'm going to win the knight. And I saw that I would end up at least being an extra pawn if we went along that way. So what Hantian will do? Queen to f3. Because otherwise, there were dangers, something like rook takes, bishop takes with the check, and then I win the queen. So to safeguard his queen, he sends his queen to f3. And now this gives me the chance to win a second pawn. Pawn to d4 check. I have to get it because if the king moves anywhere that is not in this diagonal, for example, to g2, h2, or h1, the pin is not there any longer. And if either I'm careless and I don't notice it, or there is a challenge elsewhere and I leave my queen on e5, I lose my queen and I lose the game. So I'm getting a second pawn and not having to worry about this pin any longer. King to g2, yes. And I'm going to lose my bishop, so why not win a pawn? My bishop will be lost. As I say, desperado, let's get the pawn that we can. 25 moves have finished, and I have a great advantage, 4.05, which gives me great chances to win the game, but I had advantages in the past and end up losing the game. I need to be careful. Make sure no surprises, no unpleasant surprises. But first of all, no surprise here, although it's unpleasant for me. Hantian takes my bishop, his only chance, otherwise the bishop would escape. So he takes it with the f5 pawn, and what is happening is that at this point both of us had one queen, two rooks, and one bishop, but I had 6 versus 4 pawns, 2 pawns ahead, plus my pawns had a better pawn structure. How do I need to go to winning ending? How do I do it? My queen goes to d5, exchange queens. One has to be careful. Computer thinks a mistake. Would rather have my bishop go to b6. I want to start exchanging the heaviest pieces. So there is no chance I will either blunder my queen later or have his queen with a very dangerous attack, threatening mate and winning back material. How can I lose? What else can happen? Back rank, I have to worry. My king on g8 is covered by 3 pawns in front of it. But for the time being, I have my rooks on the 8th rank. Any white pawn can be promoted. They all blocked. No passed pawns. No chance, it seems, for any sacrifices to get an extra passed pawn. Yes, there is a pawn on the 5th rank for Hantian, but doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But first, let's exchange the queens, even though the computer doesn't like it. Exchange here. And of course, I'm taking my rook, not my pawn. Otherwise, I'm losing my bishop. And I'm lucky because there's a c6 pawn. What does it mean? That if Hantian would somehow threaten the bishop, either send his rook to f4, the king to e4, I can remove the bishop because they would just exchange rooks. If the pawn on c6 was not there, I might lose my rook completely. Yes, the pawn will become isolated, but I'm 2 pawns ahead. Hantian wants to challenge my rook. Now my rook has to be careful where to go. Bishop is on c4, attacking my rook on d5. My rook, of course, cannot go to e5 because I lost my bishop. If it goes anywhere else, I'm in danger of 2 rooks attacking my bishop. And that's why I sent my rook to d8. So yes, there is no c6 pawn to protect it, but there is f8 rook to protect it, if it comes down to that. Rook goes to d3, and it's clear what Hantian wants to do. Double his rooks on the e file. I'm letting him exchange the rooks if he likes. My bishop goes to f6, which he's not going to do it because, as I say, to take is a mistake, meaning that if there is a chance to exchange pieces, let your opponent start the exchange and not you. Another quote that I recently heard the other day is, don't trade unless you get paid, meaning don't initiate a trade of pieces unless you see a clear advantage at the end. Instead, he's going to double his rooks on the d file, but now I'm starting the trading. My payment is I'm reaching an endgame that I hope was winning. We finished 30 moves and I'm ahead by 3.03. Not so much as before, but still it's important. Of course, Hantian will take back. I send my other rook to d8, hoping either to exchange or to win control of the d file, exclusive rights on the d file. Hantian postpones it by sending his king to f3. I exchange now on d3. Bishop gets back. And now time for me to centralize my king. Now we are entering a different phase of the game, the ending, where every side has one bishop, one king, of course, one bishop. I have 6 pawns, Hantian has 4. My bishops have better structure, 2 pawn islands, versus 3 for Hantian. You want to have as few islands as possible. But there is a problem. The bishops are opposite color, meaning I can only win, either of us can only win if you promote a pawn. For Hantian, it's almost impossible. But for me, is it feasible? I don't yet have a passed pawn. I could exchange it yet, but even if I have passed pawns, when they are dark colored squares, my bishop can protect them. When they are on white colored squares, they are defenseless against Hantian's bishop. So it's not going to be so easy. Opposite color bishop endings are notoriously drawn. It's much better if every side had a rook. That's what the theory says, but I was too scared to go along that. I want to make sure, first of all, I don't lose. But what to do? First of all, centralize the king to send it to f8. You want to centralize the kings near the end. In the beginning, you want to safeguard your kings with castling. You don't want any sudden mating attack, but in the end, when mating attacks are not so easy, I would say even impossible with no rooks or queens, you want your king to be as strong as possible near the center, near the pawn. Hantian wants to push his pawn to a4. I centralize my inaccuracies as a computer. Wants to put the bishop on e4. This means that neither my c6 or my b7 pawn can move. I centralize my king even more to e7, hoping my king to attack the pawns. Currently, 3 out of his 4 pawns are in light colors, so my bishop cannot attack them. Only the b4, only then my king can win any pawns. King goes to e4 to centralize, and now my bishop goes to c3 to attack the pawn on b4. Of course, I'm not expecting Hantian to give me the pawn for free, but if he pushes it, we'll start exchanges that might give me a pass pawn on the queen side. After 35 moves, my advantage is a little bit less, 2.63. But let's continue. Pawn to b5. Change here, which means that his chance to promote along the queen side is very, very small. And instead of 3 versus 2, I'm leading 2 versus 1, a bigger margin on the queen side. And I might be able to exchange pawns, although not yet, and get a passed pawn on the queen side. Currently, I cannot push the a pawn because then here, and bishop takes, and I lose a pawn. Same thing if I go to a5, there is the en passant. What do I do? First of all, make sure that my pawns are not in light squares where they can be attacked by the bishop. Currently, 3 out of my 5 pawns are in light colors. I don't like it, so I push my pawn to f6. And then centralizes his king even more to d5, hoping perhaps to attack any of the pawns, either side. My king goes to d7, opposition. I definitely don't want his king to land in... no, he cannot land in c6. e6 he could not land before, but I definitely want to have my king facing his king. He sends his big king back to c4, attacks my bishop. And my bishop goes to e5, where it cannot be attacked. It's protected by f6. King goes to d5, near the center. And I want to start pushing my h pawn. I want it to land to h4. If I send it on h6, bishop goes to e2, and my pawn is blocked, is stopping on h6. I want it to push as much as possible. So I send it to h5. Mistakes as a computer, the problem is that what I was afraid is he would push the pawn to h4. My bishop is impossible to take the on h. Maybe can go to g3, but then he'll put his bishop on e2 and win my pawn. I'm not sure how good would be that. In any case, we finish 40 moves and my advantage becomes even smaller. For almost 4, it's now 0.54. But I still see that at least I cannot lose the game. And Hantian sends his bishop on e2 to attack my pawn on h5, but I'm pushing immediately my pawn to h4. So it is safe there, at least safe from the bishop. And hopefully if I can win the h3 pawn, it's near promotion. Bishop goes again to d3 to protect the f5 pawn. My bishop goes to f4. And now I could see it would be very difficult for me to win. What was my plan now? My plan now is if I could exchange here, have a pass pawn, and send it as far as possible near promotion. Not easy for now, but you never know. King goes to e4, attacks my bishop. My bishop goes to h6. I want to defend the g7 pawn. I want my bishop to be between defending g7 and h4. I mean, of course, a white bishop cannot take it, but the king could attack them. And they are far from each other, so I wanted my bishop to protect whichever needed to be protected. King goes to d5. My king goes to c7. I'm thinking now of a plan to start exchanges and end up with a pass pawn on the queen side. King goes to c5. My bishop goes to e3 with a check, not letting the white bishop be near my queenside pawns. King goes to d5. My king goes to b6. And now we are near my plan. I hope I can end up with a pass pawn on the queen side. Yes, the bishop still protects the pawn, but I had a combination in my mind. King goes to e6. And my pawn goes to a6, mistakes the computer. You see now what was my plan. King goes to e7, attacks my pawn g7, but my bishop is on time. To protect the pawn. You see that the computer wants me to take the b5 pawn, yes, but if I lose g7, there's a chance I might lose the f7 pawn. The king is too nearby, and it's going to be very, very dangerous. Meaning I don't want to give my opponent any chances with his f pawn. That's why I didn't even calculate all that. First, let's save this, and then we'll see what happens. Next move, exchange. And now my king is near a6, so Hantian cannot take my pawn. Yes, he can take it, but if he takes it, he's going to lose his bishop, and then I have won the game. With an extra bishop, I'm sure I could win it. He doesn't take it, and now my plan is push the pawn with the king next to that as far as possible, hopefully promoting. Of course, the computer knows that's not possible. That might give me a very small advantage, but neither of us knew it at that moment. At least I didn't know it. King goes to e6. Until starts seeing my plan, my pawn goes to e5. Push it as much as possible. And have the king nearby, so if Hantian uses his bishop to challenge it, he can take my pawn, but he is going to lose his bishop. 50 moves have passed, and the computer, believe it or not, in spite of my two extra pawns, in spite of my pass pawn on a5, thinks that we are equal. And little by little, at that point, I was still hopeful that my a pawn could either promote or win the white bishop. Let's see how game continues. King goes to d5. Pawn goes to a4. King goes to c4. Pawn goes to a3. My pawn is 2 squares away from promotion. And if the king goes near it, as it happens, my bishop goes to c1 and saves the pawn. So I have a pawn on a3, 2 squares away from promotion, with my bishop protecting it. And on the other side, I'm still having 3 versus 2 pawns. I started feeling I'm doing better. And Hantian sends his bishop to b1, completely stopping my pawn to go to a2. Computer thinks a mistake. We had no idea it's a mistake or not. Now I want to put my king as near as possible, as far as possible, either near the a3 pawn and perhaps block him, or maybe challenge any of the f5 and h3 pawns. I knew at least it was almost impossible to lose. I had good chance of winning. But little by little, king goes to c3, opposition, and my king goes to d5. We finished 55 moves. Computer thinks I'm ahead by 5.18, but little by little I started getting frustrated as I could see Hantian's king blocking my king. My king wants to go where? F5, there's a bishop here, but maybe I could push the pawn. He takes, and then I win f5. H3, perhaps. These were my thoughts at the time. And the game continues. King goes to c2 and threatens my bishop. I cannot afford to lose my bishop. The game is lost if I lose my bishop. Bishop goes to b2. So pawn and bishop, a3 pawn and b2 bishop protect each other. King goes to d3 for Hantian that wants to stop my king from advancing too much. My king goes to e5. If the king does not move, I can win the f5 pawn. Yes, you can do discover check, but I want the pawn. And perhaps if the king goes anywhere else, I could even go to f4 and threaten the h3 pawn. But Hantian is not going to allow me. King goes to e3. My king goes back to d5. King goes to d3 now. My king goes to c5. And now the bishop goes to a2. So my king cannot go back to d5. My king goes to b4. Anyway, my king can help with the a pawn. Not so easy. Perhaps if my bishop could go some away, my king could go to b2, but how can it go? The road seems blocked. Within 60 moves in my head is very, very small, only 0.69. But let's see how game continues. Hantian sends his bishop to e6. My king goes to c5. Bishop goes again to a2. King goes to d6. Hopefully my king can go the other route. I had to take one of the pawns, either one of the f5 or h3, hopefully, or help my pawn from a3 go to a2. I was thinking how to do it, and little by little I got frustrated. I couldn't find a way how. King to e4, my king goes to e7. King to f4. Now I don't want to lose my h4 pawn no matter what. That's why book bishop goes to c1 check. King goes to e4. What's happening is if it goes to g4, my bishop goes to g6 and protect my pawn. But I also win time for my king to start advancing along the queen side. Hantian knew that to g4 would give him no hope. That's why he wanted to stop my king from going in the queen side. His king goes to e4. And now this is move number 65. Let's see what did I play here. My king goes to f8. Any chance that my king could go through g8 and go here, but no, the bishop on h2 is controlling this entire diagonal. I didn't really know what to do at that point. My advantage was extremely small, 0.07, and this is really a theoretical draw. Since there are how many pieces on the board? 3, 6, 10. We cannot use the tables. The tables are only for 7 pieces of hue, but I could feel it that this was a theoretical draw. I had missed my chance to win. Maybe I should not have changed the rooks until the end. But let's see. Let's keep on fighting. If you've seen the, if you see what happened before, move number 52, I pushed my pawn on a3. And you see here that from 52 until 65 have 13 moves that neither pawn has been pushed or there have been any captures. Any chance I would end up with a 50 move draw. I was going to fight it and see what was going to happen. I knew that there was a limit. And if things went that way, it was almost impossible for pawns to move or for captures. And of course, I'm not going to push my pawn from g7 to g5. If there was no Ampasan, I would do it, but not now because pawn goes to g6 and Hantian suddenly has a chance to win even the game. Now king goes to f3. My king goes to e7. Why mistakes the computer? Computer, believe it or not, you see here what's happening. Computer has an advantage of 3.04, but my best move is boost the pawn to g5, but then my advance becomes only 0.73. And you may be wondering what's happening. Isn't your advantage as good as the best move you can play? In theory, yes, but the situation is so quote-unquote crazy, so irrational that the computer does not even know how to evaluate it. That's what it means. And if the computer cannot evaluate it, imagine the poor two humans like Hantian and myself. And especially after so much time going on. By the way, time-wise, Hantian had twice my time, so if game went on for too long, I would be under time pressure. My king goes d7, mistakes the computer. King goes to e4, actually not, yes, to e4. My king goes to d6, going back and forth. King goes to d4. My bishop goes to b2 to check. King goes to e4. Bishop goes to a1. And now, wait a minute. Let me make sure I copy the moves correctly. My bishop goes to a1, basically to kill a move. I had no idea what to do now. Bishop goes to b1 for Hantian. And my king goes to c5. Bishop goes to a2. My king goes to b4. Any chance I could stop? What my hope was that if my bishop could end up in b2 and attack the bishop, and if bishop moves, my pawn goes to a2 and I win the bishop. Let's see. King goes to d3, and Hantian wants to place his king near my king and near the action here. My bishop goes to b2. Bishop goes to e6. My king goes to c5. Bishop goes again to a2. My king goes to... And you see draw. What does it mean? It means threefold repetition. But let's see why was it threefold repetition. 60, 62, and 74 were identical. And any one of us could claim it. If Hantian wanted to claim it, what he should have done is, instead of placing his bishop on a2, then tell me I'm going to place my bishop on a2 and a draw. Why? But neither of us claimed the draw, and I'm going to explain why not. First of all, it's not easy to see that it's a threefold repetition. You would have mentally in your mind, you cannot move your pieces, you would have mentally in your mind to imagine how was the position after 12 or 14 moves ago. And not only that, if you claim the draw and you're not correct, your opponent would get 2 extra minutes. So myself, I would not claim the draw because there was no way I could lose it. You see that I'm 2 pawns ahead. And although my chances of winning are very small, at least they are much bigger than losing. Hunting on the other side saw that the game was drawn, and he was feeling that if he could run down the clock, meaning I wouldn't literally run out of time, but I would have so little time that I may not think clearly and make blunders. And none of us would take the chance to give the opponent 2 minutes extra time if we made the wrong claim. That's why game continues. And my king goes to d6. King goes to e4. Again, second time that either of us could have claimed the draw. The move 63 and 69 were identical, but we're talking about 12 moves back. None of us claimed the draw, so we continue with my king going to e7. 75 moves have been completed, then it's almost even. The advantage of Hantian Not Hantian. I have an advantage, but it's just 0.01, basically non-existent. King goes to f4 for Hantian. My king goes to f8. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, this was wrong. I copied from the wrong place. My bishop goes to c1 with a check because I don't want to lose my h4 pawn. King goes back to e4. Once again, does not go to g4 because my bishop would go to g5 on time and stop it. Third time that there is a threefold repetition. The other moves were 65, 67, now 77. We're talking about you would have to go back in your mind 12 moves and do it correctly, and this would take a lot of time from your clock to be able to claim with confidence a threefold repetition. And since the game was going to go draw either way or other, why take a chance? Why not let for the 50 move? That is much easier to notice. Until now, from move number 52 to move 77, we've completed 25 of these 50 moves. And it seemed that the game would go for a 50 move repetition, meaning a 50, not repetition, 50 move draw. If there is no capture or a pawn move in 50 moves, it's a draw. Again, one is to claim it. And the new rule says that if it goes to 75 moves, then the tournament director can claim the draw. So let's continue. My king goes to f8. Next move, king goes to f3 for Hantian. My bishop goes to d2. This takes the computer, and again, computer says that if I want to win, I need to push my pawn to g5. But again, we have the same story. 3.16 says now, but if I do it only 0.93, and if the computer is so confused, don't expect me to think any more clearly. I send my bishop to d2, basically to kill time. King goes to e4. Bishop goes to c3. And now, move number 80, Hantian makes a decisive mistake. I'm not sure if the computer will show it as a mistake or not, but until now, I wanted my king to go around, but the bishop on a2 was controlling this diagonal, and my bishop could not go, my king could not go through that route. That's the route I was hoping for my king. Not, of course, the way you see it, first here and then here. That's what I was hoping, but it could not go. The other route from here is blocked by the king. And Hantian places his bishop on a2. On b1, from a2 to b1. And this is not a mistake. I believe that this was the deciding mistake of the game. But let's see what happened then. My king goes to g8. Finally, my king is free, goes to g8. I only had one chance, move number 80, and I would grab it. And then I really started hoping that maybe I might be able to win the game. King goes to f4. And my bishop goes to d2 with a check. King goes to g4. My bishop goes to g5 to protect the pawn on h4. Now Hantian has no reason to have his king on the queen side because my king is too far away. But he needs to stop any tricks I may have on the g and h files. Bishop goes to a2 with a check, but either way or other, I was going to move my king, whether he checked me or not. In fact, now I have a free move. King goes to h7. Inaccuracies, the computer wants me to set back to f8, but I don't agree at all with that. But you see what is happening. I was very hoping I would win, but computer has 5 top moves for white being a draw, and unfortunately we don't have the tables yet because there are 10 pieces on the board. Bishop goes to b1. King goes to h6 now. I want to exchange one set of pawns, so then I have 2 pass pawns if all goes okay. One is the a3 and one is going to be along the f file. If I can do it, it's going to be very, very difficult for Hantian to stop both of them. bishop goes again to a2, and that's what I wanted. Great moves to the computer, but when he played it, that's exactly what I wanted. Pawn to g6. First of all, forget about the 50 move repetition, because after 33 moves from 52 to 85, move 52 was the last time a pawn was moved from a4 to a3. And now only at move 85 we have another pawn move, meaning 33 moves later. So the 50 moves have to start to count again from scratch. And now there's a crazy case. According to the computer, after my g6, here it says 0.00, but no matter what white replies, I have at least 4.84. This shows that the position is so confused, it's confusing for a computer. But for me, I started feeling I could win it. But let's see. Of course, Hantian will take the pawn, otherwise he loses the pawn for nothing. Not necessarily. It might have been a good idea to not to take it, because I take it, takes back with the king. But in any case, he takes it, mistakes the computer. I take it and thinks that pawn to b1 would have been a draw, maybe or maybe not. But here b1 says it would still be ahead by 5.01. It is so complicated case that the computer cannot figure it out correctly. King goes to g6. And now I feel very confident. Very confident because I have two passed pawns, the A and the F. Can Hantian stop both of them? Maybe, but at least I start feeling I have a chance. Bishop goes to b1 with a check for Hantian. King goes to f7. Still, I'm far from winning. Yes, the a3 is near promotion, meaning if the bishop is not in any of these two square, a2 or b1, I'm winning. But the other one is a little bit too much behind that. Bishop to a2 check again. King to e7. Not going to give a threefold repetition again. King to f5, and now clearly if there was a threefold, I'm sure Hantian would take the chance because things seem not to be going his way. My king goes to d6. All my pawns are safe. a3, okay, is far away. It's not safe in the sense that it's protected, but the bishop cannot take it. The king is too far away. f6 and h4 are protected by my bishop on g5. King goes to e4. By now, Hantian starts thinking more and more and more, and before he had twice my time, now he has almost the same time as I have. We're talking about 10 minutes. My king goes to c5. I want my king to go near this bishop. And if the king goes near this, my plan is the following. I want my king to go somewhere like b4, c3, b2. If bishop moves, pawn goes here, I win the bishop. Well, my two ones I'm winning. But if king goes nearby to protect it, my f-pawn can start going down. We finished 90 moves at this point, and you see that I'm ahead by 6.06. Hantian starts saying that the game is lost for him. He's thinking even and even harder to see what can he do. King goes to d3. My king goes to b4. He pushes the king further. My pawn is near promotion. Well, cannot exactly get promoted, but he can stop at the 4, protecting my bishop. If Hantian uses his king to win my bishop, my pawn promotes. His bishop goes to d5. And now I start moving my pawn downwards. Go to f5, and I know I can go until at least f4 safely. King goes to d4. My pawn goes to f4. And here is the situation. My bishop on g5 is lost. But unlike the case of Hantian bishop, if he takes my bishop, he can only take my pawn on the pawn go to 3 can only take with his bishop, but then my pawn goes a2 and a1 and is promoted. I have an advantage of 7.05. Hantian was thinking and thinking and thinking, and he saw what's happening. If his bishop wants to stop my a2 pawn, he needs to be either in b1 or along this diagonal. But then my f pawn will go down. If he Uses his king to take my bishop, the pawn promotes. How long can his king go? If his king goes somewhere like e4 to stop my pawn from f3, then my king goes to c3 and b2. So after thinking for quite a while, in the end, he just tipped his king. He said to me, good game, and basically he resigned. And so, believe it or not, I won that game. Happy days are here again. I defeated the player that is more than 100 points above me. Lessons to be learned, first of all, if you're ahead by 2 points, don't go to same color bishop. Keep a rook at least. That's what theory says, and I should not have been so scared that I would blunder my rook. Number two, if you go to opposite color endings with 2 extra pawns, fight, fight, fight. Try to see what you can do. On the defending side, of course, keep in mind for threefold repetitions, although it's not so easy to keep a mental picture of every move, how it is to see when you'll have that repetition. And be very careful at every move to close all the access of the enemy king. My side, my two ideas that going in the game was the one with the exchanges on the queen side that let my a pawn be a pass pawn. Still, Hantian was able to stop it, and the second one is the moment I got one chance to move my king to g8, use it to exchange the pawns and create a pass pawn, the f pass pawns. So I ended up with 2.5 out of 5 points. And I also got lucky in another sense, because could I win the under 1700 I wouldn't call it section, because they had a special prize for the top players that whose rating was less than 1700. And what happened was that after my game was completed, there was one game with two players with ratings less than 1700 that had 2 points each of them, and my chance to get a third of the prize is if they draw. What happened is that one of them ended up having a king and a rook versus a king, which is a clear win. But this player was so low in time that he couldn't checkmate on his time, and he ran out of time, and the game was considered a draw because the other player with only a king could not checkmate. And then the three of us tied with 2.5 points out of 5 for the first place for the under 1700, and we got a third of the prize. But let's give a look at the review. Let's see what does the computer have to say about this game. "79% accuracy for Hantian, 81.2 for me, just barely a little bit better. No brilliant moves, great moves, 8 for Hantian, 4 for me. 5 book moves each of us, best 31 versus 24 for me, excellent 24 versus 23 for me. Good 16 versus 9 for Hantian, 69, I had 16 accuracies, Hantian had 3. Hantian made 7 mistakes, I made 6. Misses 3 for Hantian, 8 for me, and Hantian had 4 blunders. This is the overall picture of the game. And in the meantime, let's see what's happening in the tournaments that I have been following, because there are a lot of changes, especially the grecochess 64. I'm not going to show the other one because games have been completed and I don't want to reveal the results in advance. grecochess 64, we are near the end of the first round. How many games remain? Only 8 games remain, and let's see what's happening until now. In most groups, we know who has advanced. Group 1, Guy Jordan, international. Group 2, Sierra 78 from France and Miguel Crax from Spain. Group 3, everything depends on the last game between Bacrocha 13 from Brazil and Sisu 64 from Canada. Sisu 64 needs to win to tie. Group 4, F1954, Alex from Britain. In fact, this is one of the first players advanced. He's advanced. Group 5, Lelio 69 from Italy. Group 6, Roberto 3515 from Brazil. Group 7, TS Rajput from India. And Group 8 was where I was participating and was eliminated, Mr. Haji from Azerbaijan. Group 9, another game, Group for grabs, it's between two players, Murmulek from Russia and Subhamchintu Parak from India have a chance. Group 10, Leo 1956 from Israel. Group 11, Petla 68 from Hungary. Group 12, Bossi Stand By Me from Italy and at Daniel 97 from the United States. Group 13, another one for grabs. It's two games between Squirty7 from the United States and Sigurd from Norway, between these two players. Group 14, Hajer Kurtkit from the United States. Group 15, between Calogero 81 from Italy and Cicilio Hobing from China. And Group 16, Gilan from Israel. In the Underwater Moonlights tournament, I believe there are three more games I have not covered that have been completed. After the withdrawal of one player, we'll have 5 players vying for the championship. The next 3 days, assuming nothing else important is happening, I'm going to cover these games. Once again, thanks to all the viewers, the subscribers, the likes and the comments. This is grecochess. I'm your host, Harilaos Aniziris. To all of you, wherever you are, goodbye.